The room was silent, yet the grief was deafening. Inside the Staples Center in Los Angeles, thousands sat frozen as a young girl stepped to the microphone. Her voice trembled. The world held its breath. Ever since I was born, Daddy has been the best father you could ever imagine. It was Paris Jackson, standing before millions watching around the world, struggling through tears as she spoke about the man the world knew as Michael Jackson. For decades, Michael Jackson had been more than a pop star. He was the king of pop, a performer who transformed music, dance, fashion, and even the way music videos were made. His albums shattered records. His songs crossed cultures and generations. His influence reached nearly every corner of the planet. But behind the spotlight was a life filled with extremes. Extraordinary success, endless controversy, fame so powerful it shaped global culture and yet isolated the man who carried it. Then, on June 25th, 2009, the unthinkable happened. Michael Jackson was found unresponsive in his Los Angeles home at just 50 years old. How did the most successful entertainer in history die alone in a bedroom, only weeks before what was supposed to be the greatest comeback in music history? Tonight, we look beyond the headlines to understand the real story of Michael Jackson. Long before the world knew the name Michael Jackson, there was a small house in Gary, Indiana. It was a crowded two-bedroom home where 9 children grew up together while their father worked long shifts at a steel mill. Life in Gary during the late 1950s and early 1960s was far from glamorous. The town was industrial, noisy, and often unforgiving. But inside that small house, something unusual was taking shape: music. Joseph Jackson noticed early that his children had talent. Determined to lift his family out of poverty, he formed a group with his sons Jackie, Tito, Jermaine, and Marlon. Soon the group became known as the Jackson 5. At first, the youngest brother simply watched from the side of the room, but that did not last long. By the age of 5, Michael Jackson joined the rehearsals, and almost immediately it became clear that something about the quiet little boy was different. His voice carried emotion far beyond his years. His rhythm seemed instinctive, and when he danced, the room paid attention. Yet behind the music was a childhood that many people would later describe as painfully strict. Joseph Jackson ran rehearsals with military discipline. Mistakes were not tolerated. Long hours of practice replaced normal childhood activities: school, rehearsals, performances, and constant preparation became the routine of the Jackson children. Michael Jackson would later admit that these early years left deep emotional scars. He spoke openly about the fear he sometimes felt during rehearsals and how sensitive he was as a child. At the same time, he also acknowledged something more complicated. That discipline created the stage act that stunned audiences. By the late 1960s, the Jackson 5 were touring clubs across the American Midwest, night after night. Audiences saw something remarkable: a group of talented brothers led by a tiny singer with an electrifying presence. Then came the moment that changed everything. Berry Gordy of Motown Records signed the Jackson 5. Their first major single, "I Want You Back," exploded onto the charts. It went straight to #1 in the United States and sold over 1 million copies, almost overnight. Michael Jackson was no longer just a child from Gary. He was becoming a star. And yet, for the young boy at the center of it all, the journey was only beginning. Because even as the Jackson 5 conquered the charts, Michael Jackson was quietly studying something bigger. He was learning how to become an artist who could one day stand alone. By the late 1970s, Michael Jackson was ready to step out of the shadow of the Jackson 5. He had spent years studying the great performers who came before him. When he was not on stage, he was often standing just off to the side, watching legends like James Brown, Jackie Wilson, and Smokey Robinson. Every move, every note, every detail became part of a quiet education. Michael Jackson was not just performing, he was learning. That preparation came together in 1979 with the release of his solo album, Off the Wall, produced by the brilliant Quincy Jones. The record was vibrant, energetic, and impossible to ignore. Songs like Don't Stop Till You Get Enough and Rock With You filled dance floors across America. For the first time, Michael Jackson was no longer just the lead singer of a famous family group. He was becoming a star in his own right, but nothing could prepare the world for what came next. In 1982, Michael Jackson released an album that would change the music industry forever, Thriller. The album was unlike anything audiences had heard before. It blended pop, funk, rock, and soul into a sound that felt completely new. Songs like Billie Jean, Beat It, and the haunting title track Thriller dominated the charts around the world. Yet the music was only part of the revolution. Michael Jackson understood that music could be seen as well as heard. The music video for Billie Jean introduced a new level of cinematic storytelling, but it was the Thriller video that truly redefined the medium. At over 14 minutes long, it was closer to a short film than a traditional music video. Directed by John Landis and filled with groundbreaking choreography, the video became a global sensation. Suddenly, everyone wanted to dance like Michael Jackson. Then came the moment that sealed his legend. In 1983, during a television special celebrating the 25th anniversary of Motown, Michael Jackson performed Billie Jean. Halfway through the performance, he glided backward across the stage in a move that looked almost impossible, the moonwalk. Within hours, the performance was being replayed across the world. The image of Michael Jackson in a black jacket, sparkling glove, and fedora became one of the most recognizable moments in entertainment history. Thriller went on to sell more than 100 million copies worldwide, becoming the best-selling album of all time. By the age of 25, Michael Jackson had become something more than a musician. He was a cultural phenomenon, but as his fame grew larger than anyone had imagined, so did the scrutiny surrounding his life. And the world was about to watch that fame turn into something far more complicated. At the height of his fame, Michael Jackson appeared to have everything the world could offer: success, wealth, global admiration. Yet behind the extraordinary achievements, something more complicated was beginning to unfold. In 1988, Michael Jackson purchased a vast property in Santa Barbara County, California. He transformed it into a place unlike anything the public had ever seen before. He called it Neverland Ranch, spread across thousands of acres. Neverland looked less like a home and more like a dream created by a child. There were amusement rides, a private zoo, a movie theater, and gardens designed to feel like a fantasy world. For Michael Jackson, Neverland was more than luxury. It was an escape. Friends later said that the ranch reflected something deeply personal about it. A man who had spent his childhood rehearsing, touring, and performing was trying to recreate the childhood he felt he had missed. But the world outside Neverland did not see it that way. In 1993, the allegations shocked fans across the world and quickly became one of the biggest celebrity scandals in history. Michael Jackson strongly denied the accusations. The case was eventually settled out of court, and no criminal charges were filed at the time. Still, the damage to his reputation was immediate and enormous. The headlines did not fade, and the media attention surrounding his private life grew even more intense. At the same time, the public began to focus on something else: his appearance. Over the years, Michael Jackson's face had gradually changed. Rumors spread quickly. Some claimed he was trying to alter his identity. Others speculated about endless cosmetic surgery. What many people did not understand was that Michael Jackson had been diagnosed with vitiligo, a skin condition that causes the loss of pigment. The condition gradually lightened patches of his skin. Yet speculation often moved faster than the truth. By the early 2000s, Michael Jackson was living under constant scrutiny. In 2003, he faced another set of allegations involving child abuse. This time, the case went to trial. For months, the world watched as the proceedings unfolded in a California courtroom. Michael Jackson maintained his innocence. The trial lasted nearly 3 months and placed enormous emotional strain on the singer. Supporters gathered outside the courthouse each day, while critics questioned every detail of his life. Then, in June 2005, the verdict finally arrived. Michael Jackson was found not guilty on all charges. Legally cleared, he walked out of the courtroom a free man. But the long public battle had left visible scars. The man who once seemed unstoppable now appeared increasingly fragile. The years of controversy, pressure, and relentless media attention had taken their toll. And as the world continued to debate the truth about Michael Jackson, another struggle was quietly growing behind the scenes, one that would eventually lead to the most tragic chapter of his life. Few entertainers in history have shaped global culture the way Michael Jackson did. By the 1980s, his influence had already reached far beyond music. In the United States, Michael Jackson became one of the first artists to truly break racial barriers in modern pop culture. His success helped change the landscape of television, especially on MTV, which had previously given very limited exposure to black artists. When the video for Billie Jean began receiving heavy rotation, it opened doors that had long been closed. Suddenly, audiences across America were seeing a new kind of pop star. Michael Jackson was not defined by genre, race, or borders. He was simply everywhere, from Tokyo to London, from New York to Johannesburg. Fans copied his dance moves, his voice, even the way he dressed, the single white glove, the black fedora. And the sharp dance steps became symbols recognized around the world. But admiration often came with intense curiosity. As his fame grew larger, the public fascination with Michael Jackson also deepened. Every aspect of his life became headline material. His appearance, his friendships, his personal habits, and even the way he lived at Neverland Ranch were constantly examined and debated. In many ways, Michael Jackson became one of the first global celebrities to experience what would later become the modern culture of non-stop media scrutiny. Yet despite the controversies and the endless speculation, something remarkable continued to happen. The music endured. Songs like Billie Jean, Beat It, Black or White, and Heal the World continued to resonate with audiences across generations. His performances inspired countless artists who would follow in his footsteps. Even critics who questioned his lifestyle rarely denied his artistic brilliance. For many people in America and around the world, Michael Jackson represented something rare. He was a performer who could unite audiences from completely different backgrounds. His work crossed language barriers, cultural divisions, and generational gaps. And perhaps that is why, when news of his death finally broke in 2009, the reaction was unlike anything the entertainment world had seen before, because in that moment, millions realized they had not just lost a celebrity, they had lost a piece of their own history. In early 2009, Michael Jackson stood before a crowd of reporters in London and made an announcement that electrified the music world. "These will be my final show performances in London. This is it." The concert series, scheduled at the O2 Arena, was meant to be a spectacular comeback. Tickets sold out almost instantly. Millions of fans across the world hoped to witness the return of the king of pop. For Michael Jackson, the performances were about more than music. Friends said he wanted his children to finally see him on stage, performing the way audiences had seen him for decades. Rehearsals began in Los Angeles, where Michael worked tirelessly to perfect every movement and every note. Even at 50 years old, the performer inside him remained relentless. Then, on the morning of June 25th, 2009, everything changed. Emergency services received a call from Michael Jackson's home on Carrollwood Drive in Los Angeles. The caller reported that a man was not breathing. Paramedics rushed to the scene. But despite their efforts, Michael Jackson could not be revived. He was pronounced dead later that day at the age of 50. The news spread across the world within minutes. Television networks interrupted regular programming. Fans gathered outside hospitals, homes, and landmarks. Across continents, people struggled to process the same question. How could someone so legendary disappear so suddenly? Investigators soon discovered that Michael Jackson had been given propofol, a powerful anesthetic normally used only in hospital settings. The drug had been administered by his personal physician, Dr. Conrad Murray. After a lengthy investigation and trial, Murray was found guilty of involuntary manslaughter. Yet even that verdict could not fully answer the deeper questions surrounding Michael Jackson's life. Because in the end, his story was never just about fame, controversy, or tragedy. It was about influence. Michael Jackson changed the sound of modern music. He transformed the music video into an art form. He inspired generations of performers, and brought people from different cultures together through rhythm and movement. And even now, years after his passing, his music continues to echo across the world. Some artists become famous. A few become legends. But once in a generation, someone appears whose work reshapes the entire landscape of entertainment. Michael Jackson was one of those rare figures. And as long as music continues to play, the legacy of the King of Pop will never truly fade.